Then I want to invite our next speaker on stage as well, Andrea. Where are you sitting? I hear. From Gusto. I had also a nice introduction talk with Andrea, and it was more about actually how important it is that you also reflect on who you are as a person and also show that in your management. So yeah, let's see what Andrea is going to talk about.
Which one? Which one? Cool. Everyone. So imagine this. You are a software engineer, and one day you walk into your office. It's summertime. It's very early in the morning, not even 9 a.m. And barely anyone is at work. So you're sitting at your desk, and at some point, the head of engineering walks over to your desk and goes, "Can you please follow me to my office? I need to talk to you." And you think, crap, what have I done? Am I fired? You don't understand what's going on. You follow him, and you find your engineering manager waiting for you in that meeting room. You're really confused. You don't understand what's happening. The head of engineering starts and goes, "Unfortunately, your engineering manager has to leave the company next week. We have discussed, we identified you as the best person to take over the role. Would you like to become an engineering manager next week?" Now, how many of you have had at some point in their career, in their minds, what I personally called the engineering version of the Hamletic doubt? To be an engineering manager or a principal engineer, to go down the managerial path or the technical one? Well, I personally have, and at that point, that conundrum materialized in front of me. And I bet that some of you have been thinking about this for a while, but I personally didn't have the luxury. And if you bear with me tonight, you'll find out how things went for me. So my name is Andrea, and I'm an engineering manager at Gusto. How many of you know what Gusto is as a business? That's pretty good. For those who don't, we are a recipe box business. We present our customers with a brand new menu every single week with 50 plus recipes. And then we buy fresh ingredients and we pack them into boxes and we ship them to their front doors. Tonight, I want to walk you through the journey so far for me, and I want to share some of my core values and some of my key learnings along the way. So this map describes my journey, actually. So out of university with a master's degree in software engineering in the deep south of Italy, I started my career as an engineer between the north of Italy and France. I was a software engineering consultant, so I had the opportunity to work on my technical skills as well as facing my first communication and leadership challenges. And then 3 years ago, I moved to London. My first role was in front-end software engineering. However, only 1 week into that role, my manager came to me and asked me if I wanted to become a tech lead and a scrum master for one of the squads. Now, my answer was, look, I have no idea what your code base looks like. I'm very new and never worked in Agile or Scrum before. So my answer was, sure, I'll do it. It was a huge opportunity for me to learn on the job. I actually started reading about Agile and Scrum. I actually became quite competent. I really became passionate, and I started advocating for the principles behind it. I also learned how to challenge people more, holding people accountable more. I started facing the first issues with delivering software. And then only a few months into that role, then the story that I told you at the beginning actually happened to me. And at that point, to be honest, I hadn't really resolved my Hamletic doubt. I had basically no idea where I was going. I really loved coding. I loved solving technical problems. At the same time, I didn't mind the idea of stepping back, starting looking at the bigger picture, maybe managing people. So also in that case, I said, sure, I'll do it. And we agreed that it was going to be just a trial. It actually took me literally 1 week to realize that I really, really loved my new job. I was really, really happy with my new job. The first challenges that I had to face were to do with mostly delivery and people. I had to deliver a very difficult project with a hard deadline that was set before I took over with a highly dysfunctional team. And I had very little support from that company. So what tools did I use in that case? Mostly the tech community, namely books. I have to say that books like The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team or The Phoenix Project during that time were really, really helpful. And then events like this. The tech community in London is great, so events like meetups and conferences are helpful because you can meet people that are facing similar issues and you can actually learn from them. So flash forward 1 year and I moved to Gusto. where I had another huge opportunity, which was basically scaling from a small squad of a couple of engineers, one is here tonight, to a big tribe of multiple squads, 3 squads in particular today. And I also had to become a domain expert because Gusto is a company with a very successful product and a very strong vision. So it's important that you actually understand what you're building. In my case, as you can see from my GIFs, it's supply chain. So I had to become an expert in supply chain. I was a front-end engineer. I had no idea before. I guess I also had a huge opportunity to get closer to the product side of things, in particular last year when I spun up my second team. And we didn't have a product manager by then, so I actually had to fill that gap. I had to engage with the product to the customers' problems. I had to understand the outcomes that we were trying to achieve. And that was, in only a few months, it was a great opportunity for me to completely shift my mindset. And I have to say, speaking of books, that books like Lean Software Development or the Lean Startup came really, really handy at that point, because I became really obsessed with the Lean principles. And I started actually using, as I have to think as a product manager. And then where I am now, it's just the end of my story, is that I, as I said, as I'm scaling my tribe to multiple teams, I need to step back from the hands-on delivery. I need to hold people accountable more. And that's why I'm trying to help some of our senior engineers to actually follow my journey and to become lead and eventually engineering managers as well. I guess that's one of them. Now that I've told you my story, I want to share some of my core values that I use along my journey. But actually, before I do that, I just want to tell you briefly a personal side story. A few years ago, I got into therapy. Psychotherapy, yes. You may wonder, how is that related? So historically, I used to be a very stereotypical engineer with a very rational mindset. I used to think therapy is just like if you have psychological issues, otherwise it's completely pointless. Well, I couldn't be more wrong. I used personally like an excuse to actually get myself into therapy, which was I was traumatized for almost being involved in a terrorist attack. And actually meeting my therapist was a massive chance for me to discover more about my emotional ecosystem and to genuinely develop an interest towards emotional awareness in general. And now that I manage people, actually, this is a super useful tool as I have to debug people instead of code. So that's actually very relevant. Now, going back to my values, I will mention 3. So the first one is feedback culture. I strongly believe in a feedback culture. I always say that feedback is like a gift we give each other. I think it's a very powerful tool to learn more about yourself and more quickly, but also to create an environment of trust. Where do you start as an engineering manager? I personally suggest that you start with soliciting feedback about yourself. For example, I've been using my one-to-ones ever since I became an engineering manager and leaving some time at the end of them to not just give feedback, which of course I'm supposed to do, but also to ask for feedback about myself. And I found that very hard for people to actually open up, especially at the beginning. But then if you insist, you don't give up, with time, people will start to feel more comfortable. You have to show that you're committing to making changes, not just for the sake of it. And then you also need to learn like not to wait for your next one-to-one. You need to give feedback more in an impromptu manner so that actually is more effective. In the last couple of years, I've been also using another book, Tim Scott's Radical Candor, to run workshops with my teams. And I have to say very proudly that today my teams are very, very open about sharing feedback with each other and trying to help each other to get better. Secondly, trust and vulnerability. If you read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, this would be quite straightforward. However, I believe that when helping a team through the forming, storming, norming, and eventually performing, hopefully, I think building an environment of trust is crucial. By trust, I don't mean the trust that you build by long work relationships. That's obvious, but I mean trust that is based on vulnerability. As human beings, we all have flaws and weaknesses. And so for me, it's very important to be open and to ask for support when needed. I believe that us and as engineering managers, we play a crucial role. Because if you act as a hero, know it all, you believe you're never wrong, well, your team will be very, very unlikely to trust each other. At the same time, you also want to inspire, to lead by examples. So you don't want to show like you don't know what you're doing. So for me, it's all about finding a healthy balance. And I believe that honesty is key when doing that. Finally, empowerment and support. I think that's what Andrew mentioned before as well. I think when you move from an individual contributor role to an engineering manager role, you may think that now you have to do everything. Now you can't really trust other people to not make you look bad. And clearly, if you get stuck with these thoughts, the only thing you will achieve is burning yourself out. So what we need to learn when we become engineering managers is to let go of the detail, is to actually trust people more and to empower them to do what you were doing before, basically. However, things at some point will go wrong and you will need to help. So it's very important that you have some tools that allow you to be far from the detail, whilst at the same time being informed of what's going on so that you know when you have to help. You can't really empower and delegate people and just forget about it and then hope that they will figure everything out. That doesn't work. I think that support is key for successful delegation. So now we've come to the end of my talk. I just want to wrap up and tell you some of my key points. The first one is be ready to step out of your comfort zone. I believe that any challenging opportunity, if it's aligned with your values, it's a great way for you to speed up your growth, really. So I think it's important to be ready. And secondly, related to this one, it's embrace growth mindset. Be curious, never settle for what you already know. There is a huge tech community around us. Speak to people around you and you'll find out that other people probably have already solved the problems you're trying to solve right now. Then become a product engineer. I think it's very important for us to understand the outcomes. I think it's important to understand how the outputs, the results that we are producing relate to those outcomes. We need to start thinking as a product manager. I think ultimately as engineers, we're not writing code for our self-gratification. We're writing code to solve our customers' problems. And then, as I mentioned, know yourself. I think that to become a great leader, emotional self-awareness is important. In emotional awareness in general, I think starting with yourself is the best thing you can do. Otherwise, you're very unlikely to be able to help other people. And finally, don't worry. I think we all feel imposters. And you feel that you might be caught. I think if you are very, very open about your feelings, you'll be surprised how many people actually feel exactly like you. Thank you. That's all I have to say.